Hey folks, Nick here from Another BookTube channel, and today my top 10 new to me books that I read in 2024. I've already posted my full book ranking of everything that I read in that year. It was 103 books, including everything, including rereads. So my top 10 in that ranking was kind of filled with stuff that I had read already that I knew that I really liked. So there was a couple Wheel of Time books in there. Something Wicked This Way Comes by Ray Bradbury, which is always going to be, in the top spaces of any ranking that I do for a year. So I wanted to do a separate video where I just talked about the books that were new to me, that were new discoveries, and give these an opportunity to breathe and talk about them on the channel. So let's jump into it. Number 10th best new to me book, 2024. Babylon's Ashes by James S.A. Corey. This is book 6 in The Expanse. It is a little difficult to talk about a book that's like from the middle of a long linear narrative series because there's so much plot that precedes this. It'll be pretty impossible for me to catch you up on everything. All I'll say is that Babylon's Ashes is the finale of the second arc of The Expanse. So it's a 9-book series, and there's basically 3 trilogies within it. It's all the same narrative, but there's a storyline that lasts 3 books, 3 different times in it. So this is the second storyline ending, and just like every other book in The Expanse, the balance of well-defined characters and sympathetic characters that really grip your attention, who you fully just commit to loving these characters and wanting to see them succeed and make it out alive, and balancing that with crazy space opera action. It's done exceptionally well here. The actual story arc, the books 4, 5, and 6, the threat to our main characters is, at the time, like the biggest, world ending threat that they had seen up to this point. The next trilogy is even larger. But the villains that are set up, the villain that is set up in this arc is so easy to hate that wanting to watch our heroes succeed and seeing how they get to succeed, or do they really succeed, it's really riveting stuff. So I really love this book. All of the books in this series are pretty even in terms of quality. This one I must have just enjoyed a little bit more than the rest, although it's not going to be the only Expanse book you see on this list. I did also post a full video where I talk about why I think you should read The Expanse, just as a whole. So I recommend checking that out for more thoughts about the series and why it's so great. Number 9, my 9th best new to me book, Slewfoot, A Tale of Bewitchery by Bram. This was a really delightful surprise. This is a folk horror novel. If you're a fan of the closest thing I could think of is Robert Eggers' movie The Witch, or The Witch. You'll get a lot of vibes like that from this book. But any kind of folk horror, if you're into witchcraft in the woods, this is a book for you, absolutely. So this is the story of Abatha, a young woman who was basically forced into a marriage. She was from Europe, and she married an American man, and she's living on a farm with him in the colonies. And he treated her well, but he unfortunately dies at the beginning of the book, and then she becomes under the thumb of his brother, who's a real jerk. He's trying to get her off of the land, and the story is basically, it's her trying to, overcome that. But at the same time, there is this witchy aspect to her. It's the things from the old country, charms and spells that she does. And at the same time, there's something in the woods that is mystical, that's gaining in strength, that's making its presence feel felt around the village. And these storylines converge. And it is just great. It is such a fun read. The art in here is also beautiful. Gerald Brom, is the writer and the artist. He is a painter, and the cover is done by him, and it's absolutely incredible. I scanned this image, and then I photoshopped out the words, and I framed it and put it on my wall because I love this cover so much. There's other great illustrations in here as well by him. This is a great experience overall. Like I said, if you're into folk horror, I don't think you can go wrong there. I think you're going to really love that book. Number 8. This is one of only 2 nonfiction books that I read in 2024, and it's about a likely topic that I would go for. It is Kirby, King of Comics by Mark Evanier. This is a biography of Jack Kirby. There have been a lot of biographies of Jack Kirby out there. Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics by Tom Scioli is another really good one. That one is in comic book format. This is not a comic. This is, but it does feature a lot of images from Jack Kirby's career. But it is, just a regular old history of him, of his life, of his humble beginnings. So, in New York City, growing up in New York City in basically like a tenement house, and just how he eventually got his way to, working with Stan Lee at Marvel and creating the Marvel universe. As a huge Jack Kirby fan, I knew the majority of the stuff that was in here already, but the way that it is presented is really accessible to somebody new who's not super familiar with Kirby's life already. And it has the added benefit of having the artwork of Kirby on display in this nice little slightly oversized format. Like, come on, just look at that. Like, being able to read someone's biography and then just being able to see an image like this, that like they made that. Jack Kirby was incredible. So I love this book because it's about one of my favorite people, about someone who's very, very important to me. Obviously, Jack Kirby, the greatest superhero cartoonist of all time. If you enjoy comic books, if you enjoy anything from the Marvel Cinematic Universe, you owe it to yourself to know who was the actual man behind those characters that you love. It's not to say that Stan Lee didn't have anything to do with the characters created, but Jack Kirby had more to do with the characters, and Steve Ditko as well. And you angry fanboys can leave your comments all you want. It's true. Jack Kirby did more than Stan. All right, number 7 is, here we go. I'm really surprised that this is this high on my list, but I really loved this book, and I do have a full video on this one as well. It's X, the novelization of the movie by Ty West by Tim Wagner. So X was a movie that came out, was it 2024 or was it 2023? I think it was 2023. It's a movie about a bunch of young people in the 1970s, 1979 in Texas, who decide to make their own adult film. They rent out a farmhouse from an old couple, and people start dying. It is, on the surface, it sounds like a really just dirty, grungy slasher. It is, but it also has a wonderful, like very surprising theme and emotional core to it about aging and getting older and feeling unfulfilled in your life. It's so surprising. The movie was, and the book, the novelization captures those themes perfectly. And not only does it capture those themes and amplify them, it also has the benefit of, going into this ensemble of characters' heads. So all of these different characters that we get to know in the movie, who we already like, we get to like them even more here because we get to learn a little bit more about their motivations, why they are the way they are, who they actually are versus, the facade that some people might see them as. It's just great. It's so good. The Pearl novelization I also liked a lot, but it wasn't as good as X. X, I think, is just a stronger movie in general, which I know is um, not what most people say, but I do think X is the better movie, and I think it made for a better novelization as well. All right, number 6. This is a book from the 87th Precinct series. It is King's Ransom by Ed McBain. I think this is one of the most perfect moral dilemmas I've ever read, and it's executed fantastically by McBain. So the basic premise here is that kidnappers attempt to kidnap the son of a wealthy businessman. They accidentally capture his chauffeur's son, who looks very similar to his son. But they call the man and they say, "Doesn't matter that we got the wrong kid. We're still demanding the ransom from you." So he has this dilemma of, do I pay this ransom that would essentially ruin me to save the life of a child that does not belong to me? It is so gripping. It is the back and forth that McBain takes you through, where you kind of think like, yeah, absolutely, like you have to do this, and then he'll bring you in the other direction, like, oh, you know what? I kind of see, like, yeah, you know what? It's not your responsibility. Like he makes you feel that give and take of like, what is the right thing to do here? Is there a right thing to do? Um, I really like the video that I made about this book on the channel. I compare this book to the Akira Kurosawa movie High and Low, which is an adaptation of this. But Kurosawa makes some key changes to the story, particularly how the ransom plot ends. And I really am happy with how that video came out. I also just love the movie High and Low. So if I get more people to watch that, I would consider that a big win. But that book is so fantastic, and it's really short. You want to read it like very quickly. You don't want to put it down. You can get through it in one sitting because it's that riveting. Number 5, into the top 5 now. This is the only book I don't have a copy of. It's Tell Me I'm Worthless by Alison Rumfitt. This is a haunted house story that, boy, this one really knocked me out. This was something. I think I was also helped by the fact that I did this as a buddy read with Alex from Alex Unabridged. So being able to talk with him and just share our thoughts together and get his perspective and my perspective and just see how they lined up, that I think really helped the whole experience. But in general, this was one of the most intense haunted house books I've ever read. The story follows Alice, a trans woman who had a terrible experience in a haunted house 3 years prior with her then girlfriend Isla. For the majority of the beginning and the middle of the book, we don't know what happened. We just know that something terrible happened and they had a falling out. Isla is now like completely anti-trans, like she's become a TERF. And the book, while being a great haunted house story, is also a really delicate, interesting take on LGBTQ gender politics and sexuality politics, and just the ever-changing landscape of like, what's the right thing to say, what's the right thing to feel, who's in the right. There's nothing simple about it. Even in my description here, I'm nervous to like trip up and say the wrong thing because it's such a delicate subject. And the book, I think, tackles it really well. Not that it's like direct. It doesn't like give you the answers. It tackles it well in such a way where it says to you like, it's confusing. Like there's a lot to navigate here, and a lot of people are wrong, and a lot of people are right, and there's a lot of, and sometimes that overlaps. Like it's such a complicated situation, and I've done a terrible job of explaining it. But luckily, I do also have a full video on this one as well that you can watch for my complete thoughts. But I love Tell Me I'm Worthless. It was shocking. There's some scenes in that that'll stick with me forever. So very horrifically descriptive. The ending maybe a little weak, maybe, but the ride and just all of the discussion of the gender politics, all of that is so strong. Highly recommended. Okay, number 4 on the list is the other Expanse book that I mentioned earlier that I teased. It is Tiamat's Wrath by James S.A. Corey. This is book 8, so the penultimate book in the series, and this is, I think, easily my favorite. Obviously, it's the highest on my list. This is everything that I talked about liking in Babylon's Ashes. It is in here, but it is at its absolute perfected peak. Like, there is not a single false move in this book. The emotional aspect is devastating. I found myself on the verge of tears a couple times reading this one, which is insane. It's an insane thing to say about an interplanetary space opera. Like, I shouldn't be feeling emotional about it. I should be just wanting there to be pew pew shooty guns, But no, like, I was totally emotionally engaged. And on top of that, the pew pew shooty bits are awesome. Like, it's so much fun. These two authors, James S.A. Corey, the collaborative, they sculpted a true masterpiece of the sci-fi genre. And I can't recommend it enough. The entire series. Check out that video that I made where I go into it in detail, but loved it. All right, top 3 here. God, I really loved these books, man. My third in the number 3 spot is Flicker by Theodore Roszak. This is so I'm a film lover. It's my first love was film, and this book really scratched this very specific itch that I have about it's a conspiracy thriller that's deeply enmeshed in film history, and it blends real film history with fiction, from the world of this book itself. So the story follows this. So he starts as a young film student, Jonathan Gates, and then the book spans decades, who discovers the work of a silent film director named Max Castle, who is not real, by the way. There is a William Castle, I think, or Howard Castle, William Castle. I don't know, but he discovers the works of Max Castle, and who is a forgotten director. He comes across this really beat up print of one of his movies one day, and he becomes obsessed immediately. There's something about the movie that is hypnotic, that makes him feel these strange things that he can't understand. And so he begins this lifelong quest of trying to track down Castle's other works, and he stumbles into this conspiracy. And this is a hypnotic book. It almost reads like a textbook at times because of the way that it gets so attentive to detail about real film history, and then weaving in this fictional narrative. It is so simple to lose yourself in, which is great because it's over 600 pages. So it can feel, it has the risk of being dragging out a little bit too long for the content, but it uses every page beautifully. I never felt like, oh God, when is this just going to end? I could have probably read this for another 300 pages because I was just that engrossed in these fictional movies that Theodore Roszak was talking about. It is a movie. It is a book that I recommend very, very strongly to people who have a vested interest in film history, who are true cinema lovers, who like a good old fashioned black and white movie that a lot of people today would not look twice at. If you are a film history buff, you must read this book. It's so good. If you are not like that, if you have maybe a passing interest in movies, you still might enjoy it, but you might see it might be too long for you for that reason. You might want a little bit more of a pace, and for things to pick up a little bit faster. You might not want to spend too much time in the minutia as like somebody like me, but I think it's a fantastic book, and I highly recommend it. Number two, this is a book that I don't feel like I've ever heard anybody talk about it, and I was so surprised by how much I loved it. It's The Sundial by Shirley Jackson. When people talk about Shirley Jackson, it's The Lottery, it's The Haunting of Hill House. It is We Have Always Lived in the Castle. Never, ever do I hear people talk about The Sundial. This book is just as good as any of those things that I just mentioned. It is also Shirley Jackson's most overtly comical book. I made an entire video about this where I did a review where I state outright that Shirley Jackson is a funny writer on purpose. Even in her books like Hill House or We Have Always Lived in the Castle, humor is very important to her writing. And it could be easy to miss if you go in with the mentality of like, oh, she's supposed to be a horror writer. But if you just let it, if you're really paying attention, there's so much humor in the way that her characters speak to each other and the way that they behave, and it's on purpose. It's deliberate. And The Sundial is like a comedy. I compared it to a really highbrow episode of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, like the ensemble, the way that they interact with each other. It is at times hysterical. I actually laughed out loud reading this book, and I think that's exactly what she wanted. In terms of plot, a family patriarch dies under mysterious circumstances. His extended family they're all living in the same very large house together, and none of them get along. And it is a book where everybody is having their own conversations with themselves, even though they're all in the room together. Nobody's listening to each other. They're all doing their own thing. They're just completely ignoring each other. And it's hysterical and it's great. This is one of the best ensemble books I've ever read. It's super fun, super funny. And also, it's Shirley Jackson, so there are great moments of mystery and horror that creep in there. And it makes it even more effective because it's like, oh, wow, this is really unexpected. So it's fantastic. Just no one talks about it, but The Sundial is so good. All right, and finally, number one, my best book of the year that was new to me, A Simple Plan by Scott Smith. I had seen the movie adaptation of this many years ago in high school, and I thought it was like, it was all right. But I was a stupid high school student back then. What did I know? But I heard really great things about the book, decided to give it a shot, and was really, obviously, very glad that I did. This is one of the more tense books that I've ever read. Genuinely, like, nail-biting stuff. So the plot is three kind of blue-collar men find a plane crash in the woods, like a single-passenger plane crash. There's dead pilot in the cockpit, and also a bag with, was it like $3 million, $6 million, millions of dollars in a duffel bag. And they devise a simple plan to just not tell anybody. They just like, we're not going to spend the money. We're not going to do anything with it for, I think it's like 6 months or so. And then in that 6 month span, if nobody comes out like looking for the money, then we'll split it up amongst ourselves, spend it, do whatever we want with it. But we need to make sure that nobody's looking for it. Of course, things go wrong immediately, and they go wrong hard. It is shocking how bad these guys are at sticking to this simple plan. And I love the fact that the book is told from the perspective of one of the guys who he comes up with the plan. He fancies himself the smartest of the group, the most reliable of the group, but through his actions that he performs, he reveals himself to be just as untrustworthy as the other two, who are depicted by him as being kind of bumbling bumpkins. So it's just a very well crafted thriller that I absolutely adored. So, and I also rewatched the movie after I read it, and it was a lot better as an adult. I also really loved it. Sam Raimi movie. So I recommend the film as well, but check out the book. I think the book is actually better than the movie. So yeah, that is my top 10 books of 2024 that were new to me. Let me know if you've read any of these and your thoughts on them in the comments below. And let me know what your best books of 2024 were. I'm also going to be publishing a video soon on my top 10 comics and graphic novels that I read in the year, so keep an eye out for that. Thank you very much for spending some time with me today, but now it's time to get back to reading.